huge panic. I've had the episiotomy, I'm completely paralysed, I can't move, and I'm probably still going to have a C-section, and I don't know how they're going to do that. Okay, so I'm going to start this one with a warning. We had a lot that went wrong during Baby Belle's birth, and this isn't one of those nice videos about just pushing the baby out and it all went really well. Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, I'm Leanne and this is Baby Belle. So I am finally attempting to film our birth story. We had a really traumatic labour and none of it was something that I could just breathe through. So before I went into labour, we'd done all of our antenatal classes, and I was of the impression from that there wasn't anything that you couldn't just breathe through. You know, based on this, it was just focus on your breathing, a bit of gas and air, and you'd be absolutely fine. So I want to talk about this just not to try and scare anyone, but I was kind of naive as to how wrong it could go. Obviously, as you can see, we're both fine, but I just wanted to make everyone aware that there are things that can go wrong. You can't just breathe through it. It isn't your fault, and it doesn't make your birth any less valid. Baby Belle, please don't touch the wires. Come here. So yeah, we'd done antenatal classes, and my plan was that I was going to use a TENS machine, I was going to have a water birth, I'd have a bit of gas and air, and a few pushes and it would all be fine. That was what we'd planned, and I was so determined to have an unmedicated, unassisted birth that I'd done everything that I could to try and facilitate that. I'd taken raspberry leaf tea, I'd been doing perineal massage, I'd bounced on bull. I had gestational diabetes, so I wanted to avoid being induced at 40 plus 6. So I was due on the Thursday, and then on the Wednesday I had a sweep to try and get stuff started. As I said, I really didn't want to be induced. I wanted a water birth, and the midwife was like, well, there's not really much going on, bit of softening, starting to dilate, but there's not a huge amount going on. So anyway, due date came, and I spent the day bouncing on bull to try and get stuff going. I'd had a lot of back problems, so walking long distances wasn't something that I was capable of doing. And then at 10 to 4 on the Friday morning, I was laid in bed asleep, and I felt this really strange sensation in the bottom of my bump. And then again, it happened, and I was like, oh no. And I launched myself out of bed just as my waters broke. And obviously you'll hear a lot about how, it doesn't happen like in the movies. Your waters don't just gush out of you like a waterfall. Mine did. It was everywhere. So that was a little bit of a shock, and that was at 10 to 4. So I was kind of flapping around, not knowing what to do with myself. I went and had a shower to clean myself up, and it just went on for ages and ages and ages. I didn't realise at the time that if your waters break, you're supposed to phone your maternity unit. You're supposed to let them know, but I didn't realise that. So I had a shower and went back to bed to try and get some sleep, because I figured it's probably going to be a very long day. That didn't really happen, so I just sort of flapped around all morning, and John got ready for work because he was working from home. There's no point in you taking the day off because there's not going to be anything happening yet. So then I dug out my maternity notes, and it said to call the maternity unit if your waters break. So I did, and they said, right, you need to come in, we need to check. So we went into the hospital, took our bags with us and everything, and she was like, oh yeah, that's definitely waters. Do you want me to see how you're doing? And I was like, yep, sure, do that. So she had a check, and things had started, but she was like, well, don't expect too much to happen today, and we'll book you into for an induction because your waters went at 10 to 4. Someone will phone you by 10 to 4 on Saturday morning and book you in for an induction. Obviously that's not what I wanted to hear. So we came home. On our way home, we picked up some food and had a snack, and at this point my contractions had started. They weren't anything unmanageable. They were every now and then. Oh, noisy baby, don't climb on the sofa. They weren't anything unmanageable, so I got my TENS machine out, got John to put that on for me, got into bed, and I was actually managing to sleep in between the contractions. They were about every 12 minutes. So yeah, I managed to get a little bit of sleep, and then they started to get a bit closer together and a bit more forceful. So I was like, okay, I'll go and have a bath. That's been helping my back problems. Go and have a bath, and ow. And I got into the bath and there was no relief whatsoever. Like the pain seemed to all be in my back. And I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of messing it up a little bit. Anyway, so I got out of the bath and got the TENS machine back on, and it wasn't doing a huge amount at this point, but you are noisy. And John was trying to get me to eat because it was about 6 o'clock by now and I hadn't eaten since about 12:30. So, and there was a lot of pain. I was feeling a bit sick, so I didn't eat anything. Hey. And then the contractions started getting worse to the point where, they were all in my back. They were really hurting. So I think it was about 8:30, we phoned the unit and they were like, well, there's no point in coming in. They're not going to do anything because you're not ready. Your contractions are still like 7 minutes apart, so we need them to be about 3 or 4 minutes before they'll even do anything. So just take some paracetamol. Thank you, baby bell. Take some paracetamol and just keep timing them. So we did that, and then suddenly they seemed to go from 7 minutes to about every 3 minutes, like really, really quickly, but there was no let off in between them. Before, they were, like contraction pain and then it would ease off, but this was just like pain and constant pain. So we phoned up and they were like, well, it still sounds like it's too soon. It's your first baby, but come in and, they might be able to give you something and send you home. So we got into the car. Contractions are sort of every 3 minutes at this stage, and it was... it wasn't nice. I sat in the back of the car, I had my pillow, I was snuggled into that, and I'd been debating whether to get John to drop me off outside and while he parked the car, or whether to go with him and walk from the car park, and I decided I didn't want to be outside the hospital on my own with the contractions every 3 minutes after 10 at night. So he parked the car and we walked over to the hospital. I don't remember anything about that journey at all, apart from apparently I stopped right in the middle of the road on the crossing to have a contraction. And then when we got into the hospital, they seemed to ask you like 4 million questions. You've got these really bad pains coming every 3 minutes and they're asking you all these questions. And then they sent me off to this like little waiting area to wait to be seen. And that seemed to take, about half an hour. I don't know how long it was. And then a midwife came and checked me, and I was like, please don't send me home. This pain is not stopping. There's no relief in between it. She was like, well, let's just have a look. Anyway, it turned out that I was 4 centimetres dilated and they could admit me. So I was like, right. And she was like, yeah, do you want any pain relief? And I was like, yeah, just give me an epidural. Like, I can't even consider the water birth now. Give me an epidural, please. Baby bell. So John went off to get the bags, and I went round to the labour ward, and now I've got no idea how I got round there. I don't know if I walked or if they wheeled me around in a bed, but they took me around and offered me some gas and air, and I was like, yeah, I'll take it, let's take the gas and air. And it made me sick. It was awful. I couldn't take the gas and air at the same time as the contractions. It was making me feel sick and horrible. So that wasn't an ideal. The TENS machine wasn't doing anything at this point. It was still on, but there was just constant pain. Hey, you're biting me. So they said, right, well, we've requested the anaesthetist come and do the epidural, but it may take a while. And this was at about 11 p.m. So it was just sort of, laid on the bed waiting for the epidural. And then the anaesthetist finally came around about 1 a.m. and it takes forever to do an epidural. I didn't know how long. I didn't realise it was going to take that long, but it takes forever. You have to keep perfectly still. You have to keep your shoulders down and sit upright. And that was just, that was crazy. There's all this pain, and I'm expected to keep perfectly still. So anyway, so they got that done, and the relief is almost instant. So got that done, and then I just sort of chilled out for a bit, got a bit of sleep. And then midwife checked again, and well, my contractions had stopped. They'd slowed right down, and I'm assuming that was because of the epidural. So they put me on the hormone drip to try and speed it back up, and I just tried to sleep because I had the epidural. There wasn't really any pain. And then around 5 a.m, I started to feel a lot of pain down my right side. So I told them, and they were like, yeah, just keep pressing the button, give yourself some more. You're not ready to push yet. So keep doing that. And it didn't seem to be doing anything. And I'd said a couple of times, and they were like, well, you've got the epidural, you just you just need to keep pressing the button. And then they have a shift change at around 8 a.m. So just before that, my midwife checked and said, okay, you're fully dilated, we'll give it an hour and then you can start pushing. And I was like, oh, okay, we're getting somewhere, you know. She's on her way. I'd gone from like 4 centimetres to fully dilated in about 6 hours, I think it was. It had been really quick. So the drip had done its job. And then the new midwives, baby Belle, then the new midwives took over. So I had one midwife and one student midwife, and the midwife checked and she said, oh no, actually you're not quite ready yet, so just leave it a bit longer. And then I think I was finally ready to start pushing at around 10 o'clock, but I was in a lot of pain. I could feel every single contraction, and I kept saying to them, I can feel it, I can feel every single pain, like the whole lot. But anyway, it was then time to push. So I spent an hour trying to push this one out. And I kept saying, she's not moving down, I can feel her, she's still really high. And they're like, just keep going, and you're doing really, really well. And all I can remember is that my face felt like it was going to explode. John was there handing me water, and it went on for an hour. And then after an hour, if nothing's happened, then the doctor comes and checks you. So the doctor came and checked, and she was like, okay, baby's stuck, I'm gonna have to take you down to theatre. And I was like, what's going on? And they were like, yeah, well, it looks like we're gonna have to use forceps. Baby's stuck, she's turned sideways and her head's back, so she's stuck, she's not coming out. She's not in distress at the moment, but we do need to get you down to theatre straight away. And I was like, oh my God. And then the midwives told her that I was, I could feel stuff, and they used this spray to check how much you can feel, and they were spraying me, and I was like, yeah, I can feel it. And the epidural had seemed to have stopped working. So then they sent John off to get his scrubs on and everything, and a consultant came in and said, because your epidural's failed, we're probably not going to be able to use the forceps, so it's likely that you're going to have a C-section under general anaesthetic. And I think it was at that point that I was exhausted, I was starving, because once the epidural kicks in, you just feel hungry and you're not allowed to eat. And at that point, I just think I switched off. Baby Belle was going to be born with me under general anaesthetic and John not in there, because partners aren't allowed in there if you're under general anaesthetic. So I think at that point, I switched off from it. I wasn't sort of engaged in what was going on. And they wheeled me down to theatre. And I mean, that's a scary experience in itself. There's like loads of people in the room, and they checked my epidural and it had failed. And it had failed because I had a blood clot. So I'd spent an hour pushing unmedicated. So they were like, oh, okay, well, we'll try it again. So I'm sat there again in that position. They're trying to get the epidural working. I've got a midwife down here monitoring Baby Belle's heartbeat to make sure that she's okay. And they're trying to get this epidural in, and they couldn't. So it was decided they were going to give me a spinal block because they needed to give me an episiotomy in order to use forceps to get Baby Belle out. So I was like, okay, fine, just whatever, just get on with it. I wasn't even in the room, I don't think, at this time. So I was given a spinal block, and they put me back onto the table, and all of a sudden I'd had too much of the anaesthetic, and the spinal block just kept rising and rising and rising. It's meant to come up to about here. It kept rising and rising, and they were checking with this cold spray stuff, and it had risen up to here. So at that point, I was paralysed from here down. I had no control over my body whatsoever. It was making me sick. So I had the drip in my hand, the cannula in. What's the matter? What's the matter? I had a cannula in my hand, and they were swapping the drugs out sort of like every 2 to 3 minutes. They were trying to bring this spinal block down. They were trying to stop my sickness. My heart rate was up to sort of like 166. And at the other end, they're trying to get Baby Belle out. So the anaesthetist wants me tipped up to try and bring this spinal block down, and the surgeon at the end saying, no, we've got to get this baby out now. So poor John's just sort of like hovering around everywhere. They're just like, right, okay, so we're ready now, and we need you to try and push. And I was like, push with what? Like, I've got no feeling whatsoever. I don't even know where my legs are. I don't know where any of my body is. But I tried, and they tried to pull Baby Bell out and she wasn't coming out. She was like really, really stuck. And at this point I'm like, you know, huge panic. I've had the episiotomy, I'm completely paralysed, I can't move, and I'm probably still going to have a C-section, and I don't know how they're going to do that. But anyway, on the second attempt, they got her out and they placed her on my chest, but because they still hadn't brought down this spinal block, I had absolutely no control over my body. My arms were just here like this, so they placed her on me. And I remember looking at John and just thinking, oh my god, she's out, she's okay, like she's fine. They wrapped her up and they gave her to John, because obviously they hadn't finished with me. But I remember thinking, oh, it's all over and done with, I can start recovering and snuggle my baby. I've literally just had her on me for like 10 seconds, so I need to don't do that. So I can't wait to hold her properly. And John had cut the cord and then snuggled her for a bit, and then they whisked her away to clean her up. And in the meantime, they were trying to deliver my placenta, and it wouldn't come out. I had a retained placenta, so they're doing all the manual stuff to try and get it out. And then I heard them say that it had torn, and obviously I was in a complete state as it was. But as soon as they heard that, I was just like, oh my god, like, you know, what's happening now? So there was more drugs, and they're saying, you know, she's losing a load of blood. And John said afterwards it looked like an abattoir, but I was losing a load of blood, so they had to manually remove the placenta, which I don't even know how that, you know, what that is, but based on what I've looked at online, and I wish I hadn't, it involves getting hands in there to try and pull it out that way. So they finally did that, and they stitched me up, and then they had another shift change. So Baby Bell was born at 1:19 on the Saturday, and they had a shift change at 2 o'clock, and instead of having like 20 people around looking at me with my legs up in the air in stirrups, we suddenly had about 40 people in there, and just everyone was having a look. I think, you know, it was one of those births that didn't go how anyone was expecting. So, and at this point, you know, I've pumped full of every single drug that you can think of, and I was really, really thirsty, and there was nothing in there for me to drink apart from some like sterilised eye water stuff, which they gave me 2 of, and it did absolutely nothing. But then I was taken out of theatre and put into a recovery room, and someone finally bought me water, and I was sick, like really, really, really sick, which was kind of obvious, but I had to drink. I was so thirsty. And Baby Bell's just like suddenly wheeled back round, and she's in a little cot on her own, and she's all wrapped up. You know, I can barely see her because she's over there. But then we were finally taken round to, I say a proper recovery room, it was like a supply cupboard, because we needed 24-hour care. I was hooked up to machines, so I was having 15 minutes obs, so they were checking everything, and obviously they were keeping an eye on Baby Bell. And if you've seen our breastfeeding video, you'll know that I didn't get to hold her for quite a number of hours because I couldn't. I mean, even at sort of 6 o'clock, the anaesthetic had only moved sort of down to waist level, so I still couldn't move my feet, my legs or anything. And then they said, you know, you've got an infection, you're on antibiotics, and Baby Bell has as well, so she had to have antibiotics too. And a poor little tiny thing, you know, with a splint on her arm and antibiotics in. And every time I tried to move, my heart rate was just soaring up massively. So they decided at about 11 o'clock that night that I had to have a blood transfusion as well, because I'd lost 1.5 litres of blood. So that was that. And then because of how ill we were, we ended up staying in hospital for 6 days after that. It wasn't a nice experience. John was only allowed to visit for 3 hours a day. You know, we were having all these tests and checks and everything. You know, the staff at the hospital were amazing, but that experience, you know, it was awful. It was awful for me, and it was awful for John as well, because obviously, hey, what's the matter? He sort of, Baby Bell, what's the matter? You've just had a nap. He was just sort of like, he's not the priority, so he's just sort of left to not know what's going on. And then obviously for me, it was the complete opposite of everything that I'd wanted for Baby Bell's birth, and I couldn't move. I had no idea what was going on. I was sick. While they were stitching me up, after they'd got the placenta out, I was pretty much unconscious. Hey, what's the matter? Oh, look what you've done to my top. You've put all snotties all over it. But the staff, you know, the staff were amazing, and if it wasn't for them, I don't think that we would be here now. I suffered a lot of damage internally, my pelvic floor and everything. So recovery has been really, really hard. But other than that, we are both healthy. And I just I needed to talk about it. I needed to get it out there, but I just wanted to share with other people as well, because I really did think that I would... I really did think that I would just be able to... There was nothing that I couldn't breathe through. Do you need a baby snack? Do you need a baby snack? Hey. Baby Belle's just having a feed because she's apparently decided she's starving now. But I just wanted to share that because, like I said, I didn't realise that, you know, it could be that bad. You hear that people need forceps, but I'd never heard of epidurals failing. I hadn't heard of spinal blocks doing that. And I didn't realise that, you know, the placenta could be retained and then tear and cause such a big blood loss. So I just wanted to share it, like I said, not to scare people, but Baby Belle, not to scare people, but just because I wasn't aware. You know, it doesn't make my birth experience any less valid. It wasn't the natural birth that I'd hoped for, and it caused us problems with breastfeeding, and it caused problems with my pelvic floor as well. But we're here, we're safe. If it hadn't have been for those interventions, I don't think that we would both be here now. So if you've got this far, thank you for watching. It was a scary experience, and it's very unlikely that we're going to have any more children. Baby Belle is probably going to be an only child, but as I said, we're here. We survived just about. And let me know in the comments if you experienced anything like that. I think it really does help sometimes to write it down, and it also helps other people as well to read experiences like that. Obviously not before they've gone into labour, but after they've had the baby, if they've experienced something similar. And if you do enjoy our videos, don't forget to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. It makes us really happy, and it does let YouTube know that the video is worth showing to other people. We'll see you next time. Say bye. Say bye. Why are you not smiling? You're waving. Bye. Say bye. Yay. Bye.